All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our 7th session. The attendance is a little low, looks like, because of spring break. But thanks for everyone joining on Zoom and in person. Today's speaker is Genevieve Bellaire, and she's the CEO and founder of Real World. And we're going to do a quick introduction of her before she speaks.
Yeah, so Genevieve Bellaire is the founder and CEO of Real World, and Real World is a platform to navigate adulthood in its life moments. She's a lawyer by training, and Genevieve began her career at Goldman Sachs and started Real World to tackle the critical knowledge gap and societal need to prepare young adults to navigate decisions of personal finance, healthcare, and insurance, what the team calls Real World Readiness. Today, she and her team have helped thousands of young adults set themselves on a path to success in early adulthood. Give it up to Genevieve Bellaire.
Welcome to our class, Genevieve. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks. It's so nice to be here. Am I going to see you guys at all, or can you see me okay?
Yeah, you're being displayed on our projector right now, so everybody in the classroom can see you.
Okay.
We're having some technical difficulties for some reason with our video camera today. So,
How are you guys doing? How's your Friday going?
sorry, can you say that?
No, I'm just asking how you guys are doing. How Friday is going so far?
Going well. I think spring break's about to happen, so a lot of people are.
Gotcha.
Great.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This is sort of just going to be a Q&A session between, obviously you guys and Genevieve. So we already have like a list of questions prepared that you guys filled out for homework last week. But I guess to start off the Q&A session, Genevieve, could you just give us a little bit of background on yourself so that the students know kind of who they're talking to and who's speaking, sort of like your story as to how you went from being a lawyer to becoming like a CEO and founder.
Yeah, of course. Well, so nice to be here with you guys. Thanks so much for having me. I wish I had taken more of these classes in school. So it's great that you guys have founders coming in to speaking about their journeys, because I think there's so much I would have done differently had I known more about startups and the whole just ecosystem when I was still in school. So kudos to you. So graduated from Princeton. I was a politics major, not very much focused in the startup scene at all, and wanted to become a lawyer and go into public service. So after I graduated, I went straight to law school at Georgetown and realized pretty quickly during my first year that I was excited about the idea of having an impact. And I thought that law and ultimately going into public service could be a way for me to do that. But the more that I looked into the space and got to better understand what it meant to be a lawyer day to day and sort of understand that career pathway, I realized that business actually was a huge and much, much bigger opportunity to have an impact day to day through creating companies, supporting people, building opportunity and economic opportunity across the country and across the world. So all that is to say is I ended up doing a JD MBA program, which was a 4-year-long program, which was awesome. But it meant that I actually started my first real job at Goldman when I was 26, as opposed to 22, like many of you might be when you graduate. And so I was experiencing all of these real world things, which you'll come to realize as well, like setting up my 401k, figuring out my credit cards, getting renter's insurance, moving to New York, setting up my first apartment, etc. I was experiencing them at 26 as opposed to 22. And so it was sort of a whole life moment I never really experienced before. And I started to realize that despite being really lucky of having an amazing education between undergrad, law school, and business school, just never really learned a lot of these practical, real world skills. So whether that's figuring out your own finances or understanding how to fill out employer paperwork or taxes or any of these things that honestly really matter when you get to be an adult to make sure that you set yourself up for success or building wealth, etc. You just don't really learn in school. So I made a ton of mistakes my first year out as I was working at Goldman alongside all these super smart people. And I started to ask them as they were kind of navigating day to day, when did you get your first credit card? Do you know what your credit score is? How did you choose your health insurance plan? A lot of these different questions. And it became pretty clear pretty quickly that no one had any idea what they were doing. And this was Goldman Sachs. This is a great company, lots of smart people went to good schools, just like you guys, etc. And so this aha moment kind of came to me. It's wait a second, no one ever onboards you into adulthood. You're sort of just thrown into life after school. and expected to figure out what you need to do by either asking your parents, your older sibling if you have one, or just going down the rabbit hole of Google. And frankly, like that's a 20th century solution. So got really excited about this idea to create a platform that helped simplify adulthood, but also helped navigate life moments. And so we focused on the first life moment, which we think of as like the postgraduate experience. So the starter pack, so to speak, for adulthood. And we've been through tons of different, pivots and all sorts of stuff throughout our journey. But what we do now is essentially help you set up the first couple of things you need to do when you start out in the real world across your finances, health, work, and life, and make sure that you're covering your bases and sort of set up financially and sort of otherwise for success. I'll pause there, but that's high level who I am. We're based in New York City. We're seed stage business, so raising our next round of funding now, and went through Techstars in 2019. So I've had a lot of experience around the New York specifically tech ecosystem.
Amazing. Thank you so much. By the way, that is an amazing story. You're very accomplished. I find it really amazing how you ended up going from a lawyer to being not a businesswoman, but the CEO and founder of an accomplished and successful company. And I definitely think that there is a big sort of trend toward integrating different majors into business now, especially at Berkeley. A lot of different people at the hospital school are majoring and sort of bringing in their passions from other fields and integrating it with business and intertwining it to create stuff. So definitely very applicable to those things and sitting in our class right now. I think you already touched a little bit on what Real World does, so I'm gonna end up skipping that question, but I guess to start off, does anybody in Zoom or in person have a question for Genevieve at the moment? If not, that's totally fine. We already have questions, so as she talks, maybe some things will pop up in your mind. Then you can always raise your hand and ask in the Zoom chat or in person. So I guess the first question that we're going to start off with, how are you able to focus on different industries at the same time?
Different industries, meaning like finance, healthcare, all the sort of pieces of adulthood? Yeah, it's a really good question. It's interesting because we get this question from investors a lot, because I think if you look at the market now and the products and services that are out there, they're pretty verticalized in the sense of, think of like the Betterments or Wealthfronts or Lemonade Renters Insurance or any of these companies that are fintech or insurtech or whatever it might be, where they do like one thing and they do it really well. And I think like that is an amazing way to build a business. Like they always say, the riches are in the niches. But I think where we kind of netted out was that the world doesn't need another one of those products. Like there's tons of them out there. They do a great job. What's missing from the market is something different, which is the connective tissue between all those different products and services, and having a place where you can ultimately find context and guidance around which one of those products are helpful for you and sort of understand and connect the dots between all these different decisions. So from the beginning, our whole thesis was we have to be horizontal and we have to build something that is almost like the thing that's pulling all these pieces together for our user to be a single point of entry for adulthood. That's the value prop. It's not necessarily connecting you to any one product. It's not helping you with any one thing. It's truly being like that one-stop shop. And so frankly, like that's really, really hard to build. And so the first couple of years of building the business was becoming a subject matter expert across all of those different topics and spending time talking to thousands of recent graduates and like seniors and people who were a couple of years out of school to better understand, not that entire vertical. So not the entire vertical of like credit and credit cards, but really what it meant at that specific moment. So like your early 20s and looking almost as cutting across and taking a very specific perspective around a lot of different topics, but through a very narrow lens of like that early, again, starter pack kind of mindset post-graduation. And so what we tried to do was limit our focus to just what is helpful for someone who's 22 to 25 years old, but across a lot of different topics, and be a place where you could learn a little about a lot, and then us be able to direct you to people who can tell you a lot more about each of those different things. So whether that's connecting you with a product, whether that's connecting you with like an accountant or lawyer or whatever it might be, being almost like the first touch point has always been our thesis. But it was definitely hard in the beginning to get up and running. And I think it's one of the reasons why there isn't another company out there doing what we're doing. So it gives us the opportunity to really create this new category of being that one-stop shop for adulthood, where we're not competing against all these other verticalized oriented products. But that's really how we approach it. And it's been interesting too, because when we talk to users, when we talk to people who've used our product or came to our product, the number one reason why they came was because it has everything in one place. So the thesis has definitely been validated. And I think as we grow, we'll be able to now go deeper within each one of those verticals and build out more tooling, more functionality, our own products, almost be a product of many products. But the first couple of years was really laying the foundation to be able to focus on sort of all these things through the lens of a specific moment in time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I definitely think that your answer hit on a lot of the important focus points that a lot of startup founders should and are focusing on, straight out of college when starting companies. Another question someone had, what was the best advice you ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. Let's see. So many pieces of advice. I mean, I think it's all about the people at the end of the day. Like, even if you're building a technology business where you're building software that your users will not interact with, having super strong team around you, number one, strong advisors, strong investors, like all of those pieces of the puzzle, but also being able to have like a human relationship with your consumer, I think is really, really important, because at the end of the day, like if you're building a technology product, you ultimately could become a commodity. And so by being able to have a personality, by being able to have sort of a meaningful connection there, and smart and talented people around you, that's ultimately how you can actually create a meaningful, like long-term business. And so like, as we've grown the business, I think I've thought a lot about that in terms of people being like the number one, the capital we need essentially is human capital. And so better understanding like what it means to join our team, what our culture looks like the types of people we attract, like what makes them excited, et cetera. But really focusing on the people aspect of everything.
Gotcha. And building off that, I guess, that sort of leads into the next question actually, about people. How did you go about selecting your first 3 to 5 employees, and how did you go about like inspiring and motivating them to join your team at such an early stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely some of the hardest people to recruit if you think about it, because you have to be like really risk seeking to just join a one person startup. Essentially, you got to believe in the mission, you got to believe in the person, you got to be able to take a pretty low pay or significant pay cut from whatever other job you're at before, and also be willing to work super hard and also have your job change a lot over the course of your time at the company. Because the reality is, when you're one of the first 5 people at a startup, like you have a job title, but you're pretty much doing everything and sort of owning certain pockets of the company, but you have to be super flexible. So I think what I screened for, and we had a couple of mishires, frankly, in the beginning, where these people just didn't have what it takes to kind of be in the early startup ecosystem. But what I screened for in the beginning was like, are you smart? Do you care about what we're building? So do you actually care about the mission of this? And are you flexible in the sense of how you approach problem solving, understanding that this is going to be a roller coaster journey where there's ups and there's downs, but have enough of an even keel to sort of like roll with the punches as we grow. And I think those characteristics have really continued to just every other person we've hired has really had to fit into those boxes as well. I've heard someone mention this before. I forgot who it was, another founder I thought was so smart, which was that your early couple of hires need to have like the Wizard of Oz characteristics. So like a brain, a heart, and courage. And it's true. Like you need to be smart. You need to be like, focused on the impact and sort of excited and to build something meaningful. And you also just need to be like brave and risk seeking enough to go for it. So more tactically found a couple of people who were in and around the startup ecosystem. So we actually recruited one person from Techstars to join our team early. Got a couple of other people who were in and out of other sorts of startups before. Our first hire was our head of brand and now is our head of marketing, but she had come from more of a media oriented background, which, given the type of product that we have built, was really important to early on have like an amazing, beautifully designed brand. So it's been one of those people who's just evolved a ton with the company as we've grown. But it really is mostly like in network for the first couple of hires, which is why if you guys are looking to join startups or want to build something on your own, it gets back to the people. It's like, you got to be constantly building relationships with people, like getting them excited about what you're doing, because that's typically how you'll find those first handful of people.
Perfect. And then I guess another question that somebody had about early stage of the startup. How did you reach your customers at first when you launched the platform?
So we had a pretty significant pivot here, actually. And it's, I think, an important lesson, definitely for us as we grow, but also hopefully it'll be helpful for you all, that when you change your go-to-market strategy, it might completely change your entire business, meaning change the product, change the types of people you need to hire, change how much capital you need to raise. Like literally a pivot around go-to-market can change the entire business. So the example for us is our initial product was much more education focused. So not what it is now, which is a beautifully designed mobile app that helps just like automate adulthood for you and set up all these different things across those different categories, but rather a place where you could kind of like take almost a course or something along, like a cartoon oriented course around all these adulthood questions. So how does renter's insurance work? How does debt work? Credit, taxes, all that sort of thing. We packaged it as almost like a masterclass for adulthood. And we sold that to colleges and universities actually to get in front of seniors before they graduated, almost the same way that you would go through like an entry oriented course when you start school, where you go through like sexual harassment training, alcohol awareness, all that sort of stuff on the way in. This would be the course that you kind of took on the way out. And so we licensed it to a number of different schools, about like 50 or 60 schools across the country. And we were almost profitable as a company, making money off of licensing fees, et cetera. But we started to realize in 2020 that the reality was when we work B2B2C, meaning we sell a product to a business like a school, and then they have to then sell it to their students, the end user, it's really hard to grow rapidly and to build like a truly scalable, venture backable business. Because what we were realizing was there's all these young people who are coming to us who were trying to figure out some of this stuff, but they didn't have access to the product because it was through schools. And if their school didn't offer it, they're sort of out of luck. So we made the decision in 2020 to fully shift away from those partnerships and instead build a direct consumer oriented product, shifting from this online website oriented course to the mobile app experience that is today, which, by the way, if you guys have not downloaded it, is like actually a beautiful product. It's in the App Store. But as a result, it meant that we could communicate directly with our users. We could get in front of them through like TikTok, Instagram, like all the traditional channels where you hear about things, as well as build out more community and like help people hear about it from their friends and sort of more organically. And as a result of that shift, we grew almost 1,000% the year that we did, which is like really, really big actually in terms of like venture-backed businesses. We're able to raise a seed round of funding, like grow the team, et cetera, et cetera. So super important pivot for us. But it was only getting to the point where we realized we just wanted to control our destiny in terms of how quickly we could grow and scale in front of our users. And that meant having a direct relationship with them.
Gotcha. And while you were, experiencing all this immense growth, were there any like really big obstacles or challenges that you had to overcome?
Always, like every day. It's kind of the deal when you're a founder, honestly. There's just always things you have to think through and figure out and things changing that you have to be flexible and address. But I think big challenges, we're the first of its kind product, as I mentioned before, which is really cool because it means we're creating the category, like we are the ones owning this space and sort of defining that narrative. But it also means that sometimes you have to educate people about what the product does. Like if I told you there's a product that will literally help you navigate all of your adulting questions, what does that bring to your mind? Versus if I said, oh, we're building a budgeting tool. You're like, okay, I think I know what that means. Like I've heard of those before, I've seen those before. And so part of our challenge is always to sort of describe this new category the same way and then get people to sign up for the product the same way you would if you were creating like Uber, where it's totally new category. You had to sort of say, someone's going to come in a car and pick you up. You're going to press this button and like, it's almost like a taxi on call. Like that was a totally new thing that particularly investors and other people early on were like, this is kind of a crazy idea. Same thing with Airbnb, same thing with a lot of these different categories. So I think that's always been a sort of challenge that we've had to face. And then frankly, building a company during COVID, which now hopefully is subsiding a bit, was like rough because you didn't see your team. Basically, you were just taken out of your office, didn't see your team for like 18 months, if not more. And it's really hard at the early stages of a business to not be sitting in a room with people, whiteboarding, doing all this stuff you need to do. So that was something not unique to real world, but just people building businesses during that time.
Yeah, and other than challenges, were there any strategic partnerships, if any, that helped your company succeed? And how did you go about creating or fostering them, if you had any?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, look, the school relationships we built were super helpful in the beginning because we learned a ton from them. We learned a ton from students who were going through our product and sort of like giving us feedback, et cetera. And a lot of that was just reaching out to schools and setting up those relationships with them and just keeping them sort of posted as we release new content or as we release new things in the product. And also giving them the opportunity to have a meaningful way of influencing what we built next. I think once we moved away from those partnerships, we've now focused much more on partnerships with all the products and services across these categories. So our business model is focused around a marketplace. So essentially connecting the next generation of consumers to the next generation of products and services that can help them, but through the lens, again, of that like starter pack for adulthood. So we've started to build relationships now with everything from like tools that help you book a dentist appointment really easily to credit card companies to meditation apps, like all of these different products and services. And as a result, we're able to learn a ton from them and make sure that we're communicating effectively to people on our product, how they all work. So a lot of that is, again, back to people, like building relationships with people, having a really clear value proposition. And I think like consistently keeping them excited and updated on what we're doing and what's new. But definitely something you have to kind of tend to all the time when you have partnerships.
Great, and we actually have a question from a student in class.
Great. Oh, amazing. Hello.
Can you see me? Oh, cool. In the previous question, you mentioned that it was very difficult to initially articulate the new category that you were in and then the value of that product. What are some of the lessons or I guess maybe like tips you have for trying to articulate a new product that is kind of in its own category?
Lessons from just trying to explain what that is, like what a new category product is to other people?
Yeah.
I think a couple of things. So we've now raised 2 rounds of funding. For our first round of funding, it was, big picture idea. We're going to build the first platform to navigate adulthood and life moments. And so for the earliest investors, it's just about believing in you. And like, if this thing works, this is going to be a massive thing. So it's less for them around, at least for us, it was less about like the product experience and exactly how things would work. And sort of like, we think you guys are smart, you'll go figure it out. Here's some capital. I think when you get to like our second raise or seed, which was much more, focused on like metrics and how things were coming together, et cetera. I think the necessity of communicating what we were building and actually what the product looked like and, what that future state product looked like became a lot more important. So some lessons I learned from that raise that we're now using for future raises is prototyping out and truly like designing out, not actual like workable prototypes, but just on Figma, like really building out the screens and the workflows in a way where you could hand someone the Figma on your app or on your phone, or just take them through it on the web and show them this is what we're building. Even if these connections are breaking, these are not real workflows, like this is the vision and this is the value prop of what we will build. And I think just like bringing things physically to life for people can actually be hugely helpful to help them understand the value proposition that you're describing and like what the category means. So I think one, like visuals are huge and it sounds really simple, but until you actually spend the time to build out the full workflow of the product, sometimes it's like easier said than done. And then I think the second is looking at comps in other categories. So even if there's nobody who's building exactly what you're building, which again, for us, there's not, there are other instances in other industries where someone's come in and been like a one-stop shop where like Gusto, for example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gusto, but it's a product that helps small business owners just like automate the back office of what it means to be a business owner. So like helps you file taxes, helps you deal with employer paperwork, but like sending employer paperwork to your team, as well as any miscellaneous like legal stuff. And so they've just automated those workflows and people pay them like, however much every month. And so we've pointed a lot to companies like that, companies like TurboTax, which just helps you like get through taxes really efficiently, as examples of a value prop of just simplicity and sort of organization that's worked in other categories. So if you're building something and there's nothing sort of new in your world, if you can be like the Uber for blank or like the Airbnb for blank or any of these other sorts of things, another category can be helpful.
Within that answer, you said Figma. Did I hear that wrong, or is that a term?
Oh, Figma is a product. So it's similar to like InVision, if you've ever used InVision before, like any sort of design oriented product, but it's basically a way where product designers will build out the screens for building your app or building your website or whatever it might be. And so like our product designer, for example, head of our next raise, we worked together to put together the screens of what it would look like to be at like not where our product is right now, but where it will be in the next like year and a half or so, to give them a visualization as to what this thing could look like. So Figma is just the name of the company where you can design those screens and then have essentially like clickable prototypes so that on the computer I could sort of like click on different things and you could see it visually come together.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And again, if anyone else has a question in Zoom or in person, feel free to just raise your hand or come up. So I guess transitioning more into technical questions, what was your first fundraising experience?
Tell us about it. Tell me about it. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah, they asked what was your first fundraising experience, so just tell us about it, yeah.
Yeah, so first fundraising was mostly like family, friends, and then, like operators, angels, so no major funds in the round. And then we went through Techstars, which kind of like pulled it all together. So if you're unfamiliar with Techstars is an accelerator program. They have like, locations or sort of like cohorts based across the world, so US and beyond. And what they do is they put in like $120,000 and then they take a certain percentage of your company and then provide you with access to mentors, to like all sorts of different instructional training around everything from like modeling to like financial modeling to sales to whatever it might be, and sort of give you like a community that you can tap into to help with everything from fundraising to hiring, etc. So there's other programs like YC you guys may be familiar with, it's out near you guys, and others. But when we went through Techstars, that was sort of the impetus for us to then go raise like $1 million essentially from other angels and operators to have an actual pool of capital to start building. And again, it gets back to, what we were talking about before, at the pre-seed round, oftentimes like you definitely don't have any revenue, or you might not have any revenue. You don't necessarily even have a product, like you don't really even have the team. And so it's really important to just have a super solid story and vision that you're communicating to investors that you believe in, that helps them understand, okay, if we're early in this company and this company makes it big, like, is that going to be a good return for us? Or sometimes at the earliest stages too, if you're working with angels, getting them excited just about the mission, like, returns aside, to be people who want to be involved in building a company that's doing what you're doing. So storytelling is huge. It's really hard, particularly being a first-time founder, to like find those people. And so the more you get into the founder community and the more you get to know other people who've just done raises before, like they'll introduce you to their investors and all of that. So we were able to tap into a lot of that. But it was a lot of finding people who are mission aligned, who were excited about what we were building, and then Techstars kind of wrapped it all up into a raise.
Perfect. Yeah, another question from the class.
Were you innately good at storytelling, or did you develop that skill while going through the process? And if you developed that, what tips do you have?
Yeah, I think I was like okay at storytelling before. I think honestly, frankly, like part of my law school training was just being able to get up in front of a room and tell a story, in the sense of like making an argument, like addressing questions from people. So, and I think this is a really important point, just as a quick anecdote around your career. Like you guys were talking before about how we were discussing about how you don't necessarily have to be a computer science major to go into startups. Having a different discipline or background can be really helpful. And I think law, as an example, so much of what you learn is how to like have pattern recognition, look at a lot of different pieces of information and synthesize it into like a very clear, cogent statement or storyline or whatever it might be. And so it was very helpful for me, both in customer discovery and then also in fundraising, to have the ability to like take a ton of questions, kind of like this, from investors like left and right constantly, and also being able to just tell more of that vision. So the skill set I think was built a little bit in graduate school. But I think where I've just gotten better is actually making sure to focus on two things. One is keeping the story really tight. It's very natural. It's very natural for me, at least, to like say too much, to like keep telling more and more about what I'm talking about. So if it's someone's asking about the vision of the company, instead of saying like, we're going to be the #1 place to navigate adulthood, and sort of breaking that down pretty briefly, instead of talking about all the different things we're going to do, maintaining that real sense of focus, because the reality with someone else on the other line, they have a pretty limited attention span. So you have like 30 seconds to get them excited, maybe even like 15 seconds to get them excited. So I think the more that I've practiced and the more that I've had conversations with investors, I've just learned how, and same with like people you're hiring, just being able to kind of cut to the chase a bit more and like get them excited about something they can really hold on to. I think the second piece though is, while also doing that, be able to back up what you're talking about with data. Because I think storytelling is one thing, but storytelling that has data backing it up is like a totally different game. Like that's when you get funded. That's when you get people wanting to join your team, where it's like, we're going to change the way people navigate adulthood, and we grew 1,000% last year. And like, here's how we did that. And so I think part of it is being able to have that like execution, but also visionary or vision, so to speak, and being able to tie those things together in a story.
Perfect. No follow-up question, right? No. Okay. Another logistical question. So, what is you guys' business model at Real World?
Yep. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we're a marketplace model. So essentially connecting products and service users to products and services across categories as it makes sense. So think about it this way. We're teaching people about credit cards, teaching people about investment accounts, teaching them about their health insurance plans, et cetera. And there's all these products and services out there that can help them that we can't really help them with. Like we can tell them about what they need to do, but we can't actually give you a credit card today. So part of our job is to do the homework across all the different products within the landscape, curate them, and then be able to give you sort of the pros and cons, the senses to different feature sets that might be important to you. So whether those are credit card benefits or like fees or whatever it might be, and position them in a way where you have all the information you need to make a smart decision. And so business model now is focused on essentially transaction fees there. But as we grow, we'll offer more sort of bespoke services and the ability to almost like organize adulthood in one place. So store your tax returns and your frequent flyer numbers and leases and like all this life stuff that's very disorganized, and pay essentially a subscription fee every month to be able to store that in the platform.
Yeah, and also, how hard was scaling for you guys as a company?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How difficult was scaling as a company?
Once we made that pivot on go-to-market from B2B to B2C, as I was mentioning before with the schools, it was like easy. I think at some point it starts to get like really expensive to scale, because if you're paying to acquire users, which we still are, just because we haven't hit that level of like brand recognition yet, which takes years to get to, where everyone just kind of like knows about your product, it's growing virally, organically, etc. Like it starts to get expensive. So I think the only limit for us right now is just how much money we want to put towards marketing. But scaling's been relatively simple, and it's a matter of just as well making sure your product can scale with the demand. So making sure like you have enough servers, you have sort of like the tech framework set up well and securely, so that you can handle the demand there.
Gotcha. And I know you touched on this a little earlier, but I was just wondering if you could dive a little deeper into like how exactly you went about building a value proposition for an issue as abstract as adulthood.
Yeah, when you say value proposition, you mean like the product offering?
Yeah.
So this is where customer discovery comes into place. I don't know if you guys have done like much of this in class or talked about this, but essentially when you come up with an idea for a company, like it's really just an idea. You need to go like stress test it with the market to better understand, okay, I think this product needs to exist, but does anybody else? And like, if they do they think it's a painful enough problem where they're going to actually either pay money for it or come and use the product in a way where we can make money at some point? And so in the early days, a lot of what I was doing was just sitting down and having 15-minute conversations with recent graduates, seniors, parents, employers, like administrative officials at universities, kind of everybody in this space, to better understand, okay, like this problem space around adulthood, no one knows what they're doing. Like, how would you solve it? What are the pain points you see? And having enough of those conversations, I had like 1,000 of those conversations over the course of 6 months. And having enough of those conversations starts to build out like patterns, and you start to see, oh, it looks like a couple of the big things that people are struggling with is not that they don't know like how they need to do stuff. They can go Google, like, how do I get a credit card? It's not that they, it's such a challenging process to actually go get the credit card. It's actually, people just don't even know what they don't know. And so that was a really big moment for us in the beginning of realizing that our value prop, back to, again, this whole idea of one-stop shop, why people come to us, is that we've sort of done the homework for you. It's almost like telling you, here are your blind spots. Like if you're going to be navigating your first year out of school, we give you the playbook to go do it. And the value is not just how to do all those different things, but the actual sense of like, we've already done the homework for you. Here's what you need to do. And so it was just a lot of iteration, frankly, like over time, iterating on the product, obviously the business model, the go-to-market strategy, and just testing it over and over and over and being like relentless in terms of just focus and trying to figure out what's the right way to put this type of information in front of people.
Perfect. I guess since we're coming kind of close on time, I guess we'll transition into sort of the last set of questions, more just about like advice that you have for students and entrepreneurs. So, what was one thing that you wish you knew before starting your journey as an entrepreneur?
I think it is, you really have to be passionate about what you're doing, because and solving the problem that you're solving, because the solution will change a ton over time. Like whatever I thought the initial product was for real world is so different from what the product is today. But the passion around the mission of like simplifying adulthood has been the same from day one. So I think where I've seen friends of mine who either in undergrad or in business school or whatever, like, I want to go start a company, I go start this company and end up just failing, is that it was something that they weren't super, super passionate about. Because the reality is like, there's tons of ways to make money. There's tons of ways to have an impact. Startups are really hard. And so if you are truly committed to putting 5+ years of your life towards working towards something, you have to have a really high level of conviction that it's a space that you want to play in. And so I think that's like one big thing. The second, back to the people, is just like being with the right people is so important. It's worth like taking the time to find the right co-founders or investors or advisors or early team hires or whatever it might be. Because when you find the wrong people, sometimes like that's it's 10 times worse than if you didn't find that person at all. And so really being like thoughtful around the types of people you want to work with and sort of who you're bringing into the experience of starting something.
Yeah. And is there anything different you would have done after all the experience you've had?
I mean, yes and no. I think like so much of this is just the journey of figuring things out along the way, particularly because again, like I think we're probably a little unique from some of the other companies you might be speaking with, just because it truly is a new category. Like there's not another company out there. I think if there had been another company out there, it might have been a little less fun, but we at least would have had a playbook that we could look at and say, how are they monetizing? How are they going to market? Like, what can we learn from them and then do it better? So I think, I don't know if I would have changed much from the early days, just with the exception of probably trying to raise money before COVID began, because it was so crazy as soon as like March 2020 came around. That's when we were initially going to go out for a round of funding to just like deal with the markets and the craziness that was happening at the time. So always just keeping the capital top of mind is now really important for us to make sure we're always well capitalized there. But no, I think probably do it all the same.
Gotcha. Oh yeah. Okay, your question. Hold on.
So I was actually wondering, was that you chose to only do an app release for iOS and not the Playstar? Is there certain barriers of entry for the Playstar that are not existent in iOS? Just curious about that.
Yeah. When you say Playstar, do you mean Android?
Yes.
Okay. I never heard it referred that way. Is that typically how people refer to it now?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, can you hear that?
Oh, I was going to say, I've never heard it referred to as Playstar. Is that like a colloquial way people are talking about Android apps now?
No, it's because, well, it's just if you have an Android device, you would have to purchase or like download your apps through the Play Store and not
Oh,
iOS.
the Play Store. Gotcha. Sorry. I thought you said Playstar. I was like, what is Playstar?
No, yeah, Play Store.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Yes. So a couple things. One, we initially were multi-platform, meaning we were web and mobile. And when you're still iterating really quickly on any type of product, like it's so hard to have product parity between web, mobile, and within mobile, like iOS and Android. And so we just looked at the data and made the decision, like that's probably, I don't even know, like 9 months ago, to only focus on mobile because 95% of people were using our product on their phone. And then second, within there, it was like 80 to 90% of people were on iOS. So we're like, all right, if we're just gonna put all of our attention and time to moving really quickly to keep iterating on this product, we have to be single platform, and we also have to be single like operating system essentially. So it was a strategic decision. We have people all the time like reach out asking for the Android version of the app, and I always feel really bad because we will have it at some point, but we don't have it now. But I think as we grow our team and we feel like our product is truly where it needs to be, it's a lot easier at that point to then go build for another system, or go build for the Playstar. But until then, really singularly focused.
Gotcha. And is there anything, any like piece of advice or any sort of, just anything, I guess, that you would tell yourself, your 18-year-old self, your college self, again, coming out of prison?
I think it's more just from the career lens. Like, I think the best careers are non-linear, meaning you don't just go like this to this to this to this to this. So, you know, when I was graduating from school, I was like, okay, I'm a politics major, I'm gonna go to law school, and then I'm gonna go into public service, and I'm gonna do this and this and this. And I'm so delighted that my path went a different way. And I think I still learned the skills that I learned in law school and in college are all applicable to what I'm doing today. Like I use my law degree almost every day, frankly, in terms of everything from contract negotiations to like employment related stuff. But it's come down like a really exciting path in terms of just now being in tech and in startups. So I think keeping in the back of your mind, whatever it is that you're focused on now and what you're studying, like learn as much as you can from it, but don't be beholden to just going down whatever that one path is that you think you're setting up for yourself. I think like just being able to be open to the different opportunities that come your way and the different ideas and sort of passions that strike you as you get older is will be just really rewarding as you keep building your career.
Yeah, and building off that, just out of curiosity, I'm just curious if you like, what's your opinion on? Do you think that a college student who is also like passionate about being an entrepreneur, do you think, or would you recommend that they go from college to a corporate job, like 9 to 5, and then work on their like startup on the side, or would you say it would probably be better to just graduate and then go straight to the startup ecosystem?
It totally depends. I mean, it totally depends on like your financial circumstances. I mean, startups are like financially very stressful because you're not making any money typically, and you also are like spending money in order to bootstrap it or whatever it is until you raise funding. So I think there's a lot of like individual personal characteristics you have to keep in mind. But overall, I mean, corporate, like go working as an accountant or something, or go working at like Accenture versus corporate at Google and Facebook versus like a larger company or a larger startup where you're learning and sort of things like that. I think they're all pretty different decisions. So I think if you are really excited about building something, there's nothing wrong with like starting a more corporate job that gives you stability, health insurance, like all of that sort of thing, and is something you're consistently learning new skills at and continuing to iterate on the side until you get to that point where like, I know something's here and I'm just going to go for it. But I also think that if you know you want to go into startups, you want to start something big. Actually, the one thing I would change, which is sort of related to this, is go work for another startup, because you can learn and get paid to learn by someone else's mistakes as opposed to making all those mistakes on your own. And when you're a first-time founder, which I am, like I had to figure out all these things on my own versus going and working at a Series B or C or even like Series A oriented startup where I'd have a decent salary and be able to be like building something and sort of seeing all of the failures and successes and then being able to put it towards use of my own startup later. So if you really are into that space, like that would be my recommendation. But there's nothing wrong with a couple of years of stability and like enjoying a new city or wherever you are before fully diving into the ecosystem.
Perfect, thank you so much. I guess before I ask the last question, does anyone else in person or in Zoom have any questions yet?
So I was just curious, just how you said that you were a first-time founder, and basically that's the premise of your entire application. Would you be sharing that information on your platform of how it is to like set up a business and how it is that you kind of done that, or just because since I have an Android, I literally can't even like look at the app.
Sorry.
I'm like, and I don't have an Apple computer either.
Oh no, maybe one of your friends can show you, just so you have a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I was just curious if like, just because I feel like it's very like relevant, especially for like real world, like understandings of how to set that stuff up. Is that something that you potentially think you might add onto the platform? I'm not sure if it is, if that exists right now.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Absolutely. So like, we definitely plan to, the same way we'll expand to other life moments, in the same way of like buying your first house or getting married or having kids or any of these sort of like big decision points where you have a lot of different kind of things you have to deal with. Starting a business is 100% in that bucket. And I think I've definitely learned a ton just, again, going through this process, making all sorts of mistakes and learnings and things. But the more that I've talked to other founders, the more I realize same thing as real world. Like no one really tells you what you're supposed to be doing when you're starting a company. And that's part of like the need for just being resilient and sort of figuring things out and being problem oriented or solutions oriented. But yes, we will definitely build more of a playbook around all of that. I think the challenging thing with starting a business is that there are certain things that like everybody has to do. Like you need to be incorporated, you need to figure out like certain legal things and set up your payroll and stuff like that. But depending on the type of business, it can go in a lot of different ways. So if it's a small business, it's a totally different mindset. You're not raising capital, like you're looking at unit economics, like how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, so that you can actually build a business, maybe get a loan from a bank, but you're not looking for venture. Versus building a venture-backed startup, it's like a totally different mindset. You're focused on growth. You're not caring about profitability, maybe not even about monetization for a while, to get the product right and to gain market share to show that you can grow really quickly, and then you can get capital to support the business from investors. So there's probably some like logic-based flows and things we'll have to build into the experience, but definitely. Are you looking to start a business, you think?
Yeah.
Amazing. Good luck.
Wonderful. I guess we'll sort of end off with this question. Feel free to get creative with this one, I guess. What do you think needs to change about today's education system?
Ooh, it's way too expensive. It's like insane how expensive it is, particularly because now there are so many tools and resources online for free that you can learn almost the same things. So whether those are like master classes or just literally going through like Twitter threads to understand how certain concepts work. There's so much content, so much information out there. And I think charging as much as like universities in particular do for education without the promise of a job after, without some sort of accountability around actually getting you to where you need to go is tough. So I think the expense is crazy. I also just think there's so much to be said for more skills-based training. Like not everyone needs to go to college. Not everyone needs to get that type of degree to go have a super successful career and be a programmer or be a software engineer and go to a boot camp and then like ultimately find the right job for them. Or to do something that like involves working with your hands where you don't necessarily need to go sit in a lecture hall and like learn all these different concepts or have any desire to. So I think just having more pathways and also trying to bring the cost down across the board is like what's coming, frankly, because there's no way our system can keep supporting such expense in terms of these, in terms of schools, and also have the same like economic opportunities post-graduation. So that's, I feel pretty impassioned about this space, to be honest, just because it's a space I've spent a lot of time in. But that would be my thought there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that input. I think it definitely comforts all of us over here in college.
Yes, I'm sure you feel the pain.
So passionate about creating companies and making solutions to the extremely expensive education. So yeah. But yeah, I guess that sort of wraps up our Q&A session. Genevieve, could we get a round of applause for Genevieve?
Thanks, guys. Great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity. And please tell your friends about Real World. It's actually like an amazing product and hopefully will be super helpful for you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Genevieve.
All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.